This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and good friend, Jesse Garcia, the chairman of the state, vice chairman of the state Republican Party, as well as the chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. And Jesse and I are honored and privileged to have my very good friend, Ravi Batra, a very distinguished lawyer, businessman, political commentator, writer, a lead person at the United Nations for Southeast Asia. And the reason we decided to bring Ravi on the show today, he's also counsel to President Zelenskyy of the Ukraine. So in that context, Ravi, would you please tell our audience about your role with President Zelenskyy?
I'm delighted to do that, but first let me reciprocate and say what a delight it is to be with my favorite judge on the air, who happens to be one of my dearest friends in the world, Judge Weinberg. So great to talk to you over the air, Richard. And of course, Jesse Garcia, whose predecessor, one of the prior predecessors, Pat Acampora, Republican county leader, dear friend as well. So regarding President Zelenskyy, you know, this is a man that ignored history because history had Churchill as Prime Minister of England, and he decided that he went from an actor, comedian to president, and during the starting February 24th of this year, due to his bravery, because we offered him, the United States offered him a ride, and he says, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition, I need bullets. So he this brave president in this world of cynicism became Churchill by necessity and by his own personal integrity. So I wanted to say to you how impressed I am with him. I never expected this level of personal leadership that he has exhibited in today's very cynical world, because we don't, you know, the last leader of Afghanistan, for example, Ghani, who used to be a professor at Columbia, you know, his last day was running to the helicopter with suitcases full of cash and took over $100 million of our money and went, you know, to the UAE. But anyway, so my involvement with Ukraine is post-Crimea, when I was invited by Ukraine to represent them at the UN, and I was counsel to their mission, and therefore, as the head of state, Poroshenko, before Zelenskyy, was my client. And then after Zelenskyy won with a landslide of 76%, in 2019. He therefore became my client. I've met with him very warmly. I get even sometimes bigger hugs from him, Richard, than I get from you. But anyway,
really, I'm shocked.
But that's only since 2019 with Vladimir Zelenskyy, whereas you and I go back, you know, over 3 decades. So I wouldn't trade anybody for you and I. So the problem, frankly, is that we have put Ukraine in a box. By we, I mean the United States. In 1994, because history matters, just like you can't have justice without truth, you can't understand what's going on without history. So the history is very simply this, and I've done a deep dive on it. I wrote an op-ed back in February, 2 days before the war started on the 24th, which I entitled "Need Win-Win, Not Lose-Lose." And so it's available on Google and at the America Times. So back in 1994, when the whole world was in a state of euphoria, and, you know, Mikhail Gorbachev with Foreign Minister Shevardnadze was dealing with, you know, George H.W. Bush and James Baker III, there was this amazing moment post-Berlin Wall coming down that we were going to create a world where freedom was for every country and every citizen. And it was a better virus of freedom than the virus of COVID and SARS-CoV-2. And so during that time, in 1994, there were 3 major countries of the former Soviet republics: Belarus, Ukraine and Kazakhstan, who had lots and lots of nuclear weapons. We wanted those weapons. We wanted to reduce all nuclear weapons that we possibly could. So leaving the Russian weapons aside, the nukes aside, we said, through Bill Clinton at the time in 94, please give up your weapons. Go defenseless. Go defenseless because we will protect you. So in 1994, a Budapest memorandum was signed with us guaranteeing, and I'm using the word guarantee, even though the language in the document says security assurance, whereas NATO Article 5 is guaranteed. But I'm using the word guarantee because, Your Honor, if you put your robes back on and for a moment go back on the bench, you will explain to your listening audience that a contract can come up without a signature if you have detrimental reliance upon a promise of another.
That's exactly correct.
And once you have that, it's a binding contract. So all of our leadership in Washington are lying to us and lying to the world when they say that the security assurance is not binding. Sure it is. You know why? Because Ukraine gave up 1,600 nukes. If they had the nukes, do you think they'd be molested by anybody? Do you think Belarus would be molested by Russia? Do you think Kazakhstan would be molested? Nobody would dare because they had all these nukes. On our word and our word alone, as the biggest leader in the world, champion of history, champion of freedom since 1776, showing the world how to self-govern since 1787, they took our word. And what was our word worth? Nothing. Nothing. So as a result, we have allowed President Putin, who's been waiting 20 years to deal with a reverse Cuban Missile Crisis that he feels. Whether he's right or wrong is a different matter. As a judge, you got both sides. You got one side and the other side. But Ukraine is an innocent victim here. They relied upon us to go defenseless because they expected us to defend them. And we're not defending them. We're sending them some support.
And by the way,
defending them,
and Ravi,
if we were defending them, there would never have been a war started.
Ravi, that's exactly the point. Jesse and I have been talking about this at great length over the length of our show on the Long Island Report. We've said too little, too late. And as the Wall Street Journal has pointed out, Ravi, this is clear a message that the United States is sending. We're not here to keep you as a winner. We just don't want Russia to lose. So they don't want Ukraine to win. They don't want Russia to lose. And they want this quagmire, this continuing stalemate, and let it play out. And I think that's morally indefensible. You have the genocide going on of the Ukrainian people. You have war crimes going on. And they say, well, they can't find people to accuse of war crimes. That's not hard. Accuse the foreign minister of Russia. Accuse the president of Russia. They're the ones who are guilty of the war crimes, Ravi.
I want to back away from the war crimes label for a different reason. And I'm not even getting into the merits of it for a different reason. First of all, I find Ukrainian blood to be as precious as American blood. Okay. Second, I am ashamed that we did not honor the Budapest Memorandum. I'm ashamed that they relied on our word and word alone and gave up 1,600 nukes. If they had kept one nuclear warhead, they wouldn't have been molested on February 24th of this year. They gave up 1,600. Okay. They were impenetrable, more impenetrable than the walls of Troy. But they gave it up on our word, and we walked away. And what are we saying to them? I'm writing an op-ed right now, Richard, which will be published in about a week. We're playing Russian roulette, which ends up in a Mexican standoff, because we can't win against Russia because they've got 6,000 nukes. So at some point, if we win through conventional means and we shed a lot more blood of Ukrainian blood and destroy more of Ukraine, at the end of that day, all Russia's got a choice is go nuclear. They're not going to walk away. They're going to go nuclear. So what are we doing here? What we have done is the answer today is President Biden's got to look in the camera with a steady gaze and say, Mr. Putin, we gave our sacred word, the sacred honor coming from 1776 Declaration of Independence, we collateralized nothing except our sacred honor to declare independence. That was the only thing we collateralized. That's what our nation is founded on, sacred honor. We blew it when this war started. It's a shame for us. Kabul was a disaster. This is a bigger disaster because here we were bound to defend them. All President Biden has to do now that he's COVID-free, he can take a few days to rest and get stronger, but he's got to look in the camera and say, President Putin, I'm stopping the war now by imposing a no-fly zone. We're not looking for a war with you, but you're not going to send any more missiles and any more tanks and any more shells. This war stops now. Second, you have an issue about NATO expanding around your neck that you feel that you've got a reverse Cuban Missile Crisis. Whether you're right or you're wrong, my team will meet your team. And if they can't come up with an answer, we'll have the Chief Justice of the United States sit on a tribunal with the Chief Justice of Russia, and they'll appoint another third judge, and they'll decide the merit. But we're not going to shed any more blood. And we're not going to have 50 million die of hunger because there's a food insecurity now. And we're not going to have a hyperinflation of double prices of gas because of this war. This is a disaster of colossal proportions. Whatever victory we had in World War II, we just blew it in this war.
Okay, Jesse.
I'm very, very upset.
Jesse.
I'm very sad.
Let's
get Jesse's take on this. Jesse.
Robbie, thank you so much for your service and for that history lesson. For those of us that did not realize that we had that Budapest Accord, and I absolutely agree with you that the United States and all freedom-loving countries, whether they be in the EU or NATO, failed the people of Ukraine and failed a partner in Ukraine when they did not act properly, promptly, and to stand up to a bully. And you're absolutely correct that no matter what will ever happen on the ground in the Ukrainian war, Russia and Putin, this dictator, is going to pull out the nuclear missile card. He has done it on several occasions, and that's why the judge and I have spoken several times. We need to meet this bully in the backyard, and we have to make sure that he knows that he can't make any further incursions. You're absolutely correct. There are a couple of those suggestions you made are common sense, they're judicious, and they're right to prevent this bloodshed from moving forward. But it takes guts. And I do not believe that this administration, which wants to change the Constitution, so it doesn't matter about honor for them. Democrats want to change the Constitution on a regular basis to meet their needs.
I'm a Democrat, Jesse. I'm a Democrat. But
listen,
I'm an American first.
Of course. Well, so Ravi, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So if you were to take a hard, cold analysis of how we're going to go forward, since Biden is not going to do what you suggested because you have wisdom and common sense, what do you think happens to the Ukraine, and what does that mean for the United States security interests?
Well, if we allow this train wreck to continue, we've created the following. The European Union leader, Ursula, has said that they're going to ration energy for Europe. That wasn't done. That has not occurred since during World War II. Okay? That's how bad what we've done is. So what needs to happen, Judge Weinberg, is we need to pull back and say what we've just done is a disaster. JFK had Bob McNamara, the boy wonder who got us into Vietnam, but Bob McNamara was good enough to years later say, I was a screw-up, should never have gone into Vietnam. Well, unfortunately, President Biden has a boy wonder also, or multiple boy wonders, and they're even bigger because they've spent all the goodwill that we earned through World War II. It is spent and lost and destroyed on the battlefields of Ukraine, in Bucha, in Mariupol, in Kyiv, Kharkiv. It's a horror to watch. So what we need to happen now, very frankly, is, as I said, we need to now impose a no-fly zone to stop the war, literally, just like Just think about this, Your Honor. When you were on the bench with the robes on, you had something little called the gavel. When you put that gavel down, it was case over, next case. It didn't matter if people were talking. You were able to stop it. It's like your audience, if they want to change the channel, they press the remote and they go to the next channel. Well, the no-fly zone stops this war dead in its track the moment we impose it. The war ends. The moment the war ends, food insecurity goes away. Hyperinflation of energy goes away. Imagine, you and I are blessed by God that we don't have to pick between filling up our tank and eating. But there are our fellow Americans who have that choice and have that problem. And the government doesn't exist for you and I who are more blessed than others. It's really necessary for those who are not as lucky and not as blessed. But they have every right to have that American dream. We're destroying it. We're destroying it for the world. Over 50 million more Africans are going to die from hunger and starvation because of this. That blood is on our hands. It's not on Putin's hands. It's on our hands because we didn't honor the Budapest Memorandum, which is binding, more binding than Article 5 of NATO, because NATO requires dues. It's like paying rent. If you don't pay rent, you get evicted. So if a country didn't pay their dues for NATO, they don't get they're not entitled to Article 5 protection. But Ukraine is. They gave up 1,600 nukes.
Ravi,
and they're now getting molested.
You're absolutely right. All right, I've gotten a high sign from our producer, Kevin. Ravi, I want to thank you on behalf of the Long Island Report. It's a wonderful exposition. Jesse and I have learned a lot. I hope our listeners have learned a lot, too. This is a moral crisis. It's a diplomatic crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis. We have to deal with it. We have to protect Ukraine because it's in the United States' interest, world peace's interest, and in interest of all people who believe in the betterment of mankind. We've been very fortunate
I just want 5 seconds to correct one part of the record because I knew the United States was on a completely wrong path. Last September, I stopped being advisor to Ukraine mission to the UN and went over to Georgia, which was attacked by President Putin in 2008, well before Crimea in 2014, because we're on a wrong track. And as an American, I'm ashamed of what we're doing with Ukraine. Okay. And Vladimir Zelenskyy and his lovely wife, who I've met, are really champions in the pages of history because they're as brave as they are defenseless because they relied on us. And we owe it to them to stop this war now. Just stop it. Put a button. Judge Weinberg, slam that gavel down. Demand a no-fly zone. That there's no other answer.
Well, Jesse and I, if we had that power, we would have slammed it a long time ago. Ravi Batra, distinguished lawyer, diplomat, counsel to President Zelenskyy of the Ukraine, a great student of history and a very wise man and my very close and dear personal friend. I want to thank you for being on the Long Island Report today. This has been very instructive for all of us. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Jesse Garcia, chair of the Republican Party. We'll be back in a moment.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and very good friend, Jesse Garcia, the chair of the Republican Party in Suffolk County and the vice chair of the state Republican Party. Jesse, you and I just had a very interesting conversation with Ravi Batra, distinguished lawyer, diplomat, UN person where he chairs the conference on Southeast Asia. Also, the personal counsel to President Zelenskyy of the Ukraine. What did you think of that interview?
I thought he was passionate. I think he educated our listeners. It's important to realize what history has taught us. I was never aware of the Budapest Accords and our commitment to protect the people of Ukraine and the Ukrainian nation after they gave up 1,600 nuclear warheads. But I have one question for you before we go to another subject that I know is important on our minds. We spoke off. What the imposition of a no-fly zone? What would be the next step, though? Does Putin's Russia then try and violate that? If they do try and violate that no-fly zone, what is the American response? What is the United Nations response? Would be nothing.
The United Nations does nothing because they act through the Security Council, and Russia and China have veto power on that.
Exactly.
So that's why
but what
the
about
Security
the EU and NATO?
Well, NATO is a different discussion. NATO's a different discussion. The problem is, it's a game of chicken, and if we put up, and that's always been the problem. If you have a no-fly zone, and they violate it, then what? You let them fly anyway, or do you shoot them down? If you shoot them down, then you have an act of war by NATO or the United States, and you're in a third world war. Then the question is, how does it get contained or not get contained? That's always been the problem, which is why, frankly, to pat us on the back, you and I were right from the very, very beginning. They had to get tough early and give them all the armaments they needed at the very, very beginning of this, and not give half measures. And what I said to Ravi in the earlier interview was very simple, and it's very correct. The United States is acting as a policy where we don't want Ukraine to lose, but we don't want Russia to lose either. So they're looking to a stalemate. There's never been the commitment to have the Ukrainians win. They can get the Ukrainians to win, just give them everything they need to blow out the blockade of the Black Sea and regain the territory in the south and in the east. Give them what they need, make the cost so high that Russia has to back off. Now, whether Putin would do that, your guess is as good as mine, but we need to understand that if Putin gets away with this, they've vindicated a policy of hostile aggression to a neighbor, which makes Taiwan, as you've correctly pointed out over the weeks we've been doing this, since this war started. The key is, if they get away with it with Ukraine, then other Baltic states are at risk. And China taking the playbook and say, well, we can get away with it, we'll gobble up Taiwan. And that's the problem. And
that is a problem. And we saw this a little bit. We saw Putin back up. He took a step back. His forces took a step back when, after a very sluggish beginning in this lightning war that was supposed to be over in like less than 10 days, according to Putin, the people of Ukraine, the freedom fighters, they pushed back against this monster, and it made them take pause. They were losing tanks, they were losing generals, they were losing, they were shedding their own blood, and it took them time to recalculate and move forward. And how they recalculated and move forward? They went after civilian population, which is a war crime. And I think that's what needed to be done early. We needed to take a very strong step forward in the early days. I think NATO, the EU, and the United States needs to take another step forward to push back on this, as you pointed out, on the Black Sea.
Yeah, listen, the Black Sea is the key to everything, because now they've backed off a little bit and they're letting the food go through. He's playing carrot and stick, that is Putin. The point is that he's played a multifaceted war. He's using a refugee crisis. He's flooding Europe with refugees. 1. Food. 2. Oil. 3. And you can't let him win, because if this strategy wins, no one is safe over there for the reestablishment of the Russian Empire. And that's the problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, now you had a couple of issues that you wanted to raise before we moved on. We've lost 2 very distinguished and wonderful people. Would you tell our audience about that?
We did. This past week, 2 great men of the community of New York State and of politics. Michael Long, the 31-year state chairman of the Conservative Party, succumbed to an illness and was laid to rest. I went to his wake. And another one, a little bit more local home, the former Board of Elections Commissioner for the Republicans and the Republican County Leader, Harry Withers, passed away. Unfortunately, he succeeded Patty Akampora, who we discussed, just recently, just before, with Robbie. Robbie's friendly with Patty Akampora, who was a member of the Assembly. Her mom served as a 10-year supervisor in the town of Brookhaven, the largest town in Suffolk County. She served as a county leader and also as a member of the PFC and still active all these years in the town of Southhold as a member of one of the land use boards, either the Planning Board or the Zoning Board of Appeals, and a dear friend. And I do want to just acknowledge those, two men who contributed to our communities here in Suffolk County and the state of New York and to the politics in general.
Well, and I didn't know your colleague from Suffolk County, but I knew Mike Long very well. I dealt with Mike, since 1989. I knew him when I was at City Hall, when I was General Counsel of City Council. He was a man of integrity. He was a man of principle, of pure honesty, a great patriot, a man of his word, self-effacing, always wanted to help make New York State and the United States better places to be, and selflessly gave of his time and his effort. Mike was a dear, good friend, and I'll miss him terribly. I want the record to be clear on that. So let's go back, because you had something else that you raised. You were talking about the attack on Congressman Lee Zeldin, who's a Republican candidate for governor. I want you to talk about that, please.
Sure. I mean, on Thursday night, I received a text message and a call that someone had attacked Lee Zeldin along his bus tour throughout the state of New York. And this veteran, obviously he had some mental issues, jumped up on stage and with a brass knuckles that had
spikes,
knife edges at the end, came after him and almost hit him in the throat. And Lee Zeldin, a martial arts black belt and also an Army Ranger, was able to fend him off until other security and local residents jumped on to subdue him before he got arrested. But a couple of issues that are here that I think we should point out, and I spoke to this about that night on News 12, is that number one, Lee Zeldin was prophetic. He said that within hours, this perpetrator who was charged with a felony would be out because of cashless bail. Ironically, Lee was speaking about the importance and need to make our community safer by repealing cashless bail at this rally. And number two, and even more menacing and more demonic, is that Kathy Hochul, in an earlier tweet, had encouraged her supporters to RSVP and to attend these bus stops and these whistle stop tours, because extremists, she was using those buzzwords that would incite violence. She used words like extremist. She tried to utilize the pro-life position and NRA to incite her supporters to attend these rallies and to bring violence. This is the problem. If there was this crime is on the hands of Kathy Hochul, her apology and condemnation rings hollow on two reasons. Number one, she incited it. Number two, that has far-reaching impact on all New Yorkers, is her inability and her silence to try and repeal cashless bail. This is the only state in the union that takes away and does not provide judicial intervention when it comes to violent cases on the issue of bail. And just as we said, fortunately, it was a day later, federal charges were brought against this individual, and bail was then imposed on him. So what say you, Your Honor?
Well, let me make a few points. Number one, I don't know the exact communication that Kathy Hochul had to her supporters. I think every politician, every elected official has an obligation to speak and act responsibly in these highly dangerous and inflammable times. That's number one. And if she's guilty of inciting bad conduct, then that's reprehensible. Number two, the local authorities upstate undercharged this gentleman. They just as well could have charged him with an attempted murder, because with that kind of instrumentality going through the throat, it was just dumb luck that Lee Zeldin was able to grab his wrist and to stop him, and other people piled on to hold him down. But when he went through the throat with that kind of instrumentality, which is a dangerous instrumentality, that could have been an attempted murder charge, where they would have had to hold him in. Okay? Next, the fact that we have to rely on the federal authorities to properly charge somebody under the law about attacking a federal government official, the way they did. That's reprehensible. It means there's a failure of New York law. Next point I want to make, the mayor of the city of New York, Eric Adams, correctly made a demand that there be a special session of the state legislature called by the governor saying that we need to take a real hard look at this bail reform law and changes have to be made. They need to do it now because we're losing the battle for quality of life, safety on the streets. People are voting with their feet, and they're leaving. They're not riding the subways because they're afraid to be on the subways. They walk around, they see the homeless and the mentally ill. Something has to be done. And Kathy Hochul, to her discredit, went out and said she doesn't think it's necessary. And with all due respect to the governor, who I've met and is a nice lady, she's absolutely wrong. It is absolutely essential that we deal with this, and we deal with this now, because the city and the state are going over the cliff, and this is not a good thing. And it's not enough for Stuart Cousins and Hasty to say, show me the data. The data is in your eyes. None are so blind as those who will not see. We are there now. If we don't take a shot at bringing the city and the state back, we're going to lose the city and the state. It's time for the Democratic Party, and as you know, I'm the common sense Democrat, and I'm telling the people in my party, grow up, get real, protect our citizens. Otherwise, we're at great risk. You see people fleeing all the time. We're losing hundreds of thousands of people, productive people who are the tax base, who provide the taxes, the jobs, the services, the stability for our city and our state. Let's get real and do the right thing. And everybody should read Michael Goodwin's column in the Post on the Wednesday column this week, because it lays it out. It's time for Eric Adams to get even more forceful in calling out these Democrats who control our state government to do the right thing. Kevin has just given me the sign. We'll take a break, and then we'll be right back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with my good friend and esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We'll be right back.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with my esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, the chair of the Republican Party in Suffolk County, vice chair of the state Republican Party. Jesse, when we were talking, when we took the break, we were talking about the attack on Lee Zeldin and what it really meant for the people of the state. And what do you have to say?
Yeah, we were talking about the need about changing this, and Mayor Adams, said that he demanded that there be a special session. Republicans in the state Senate and the Assembly have been calling for this for months. And remember, long before the attack on Lee Zeldin, there was a brutal attack on 2 New York PD officers in the subway.
So, Jesse, we're talking about the attack on the subways of the police officer. What do you have to say about that?
Well, and look at that criminal, that individual that attacked the police officers and it went viral. Things shouldn't have to go viral for us to take action. But that individual was recently released hours before on a violent crime, was held on no bail.
Yeah, it was an armed robbery with a gun, a loaded gun.
Armed robbery with a gun. There you go. And here's what I'm saying. These Democrats in Albany that control the Assembly and they control the state Senate, they're just going to put window dressing on it. I mean, I think that off air you spoke. You made a challenge to Speaker Hasty. Why don't we speak about that, about the challenge about changing this law and making it common sense that gives the judges the ability to do it and takes the handcuffs off of cops and puts it back on the criminals?
Well, let me tell you, I said on the Cats at Night show when they first passed the original bill, I said to him, Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, he said, yes, Your Honor. I said, this bill is a disaster. It's a perfect storm for destroying the city and the state. I said, I can get you what you need, and I can help you rewrite this bill, and I can sit down with you and your counsel, and in a couple of days we could do a rewrite. But let me tell you why, and as you correctly pointed out, why this was a real problem. The real problem is they came back and they made some minor changes to it, and as I characterized, they put lipstick on a pig. You never really got to the heart of it. Let me tell you what the heart of it is. Number one, judges should have discretion to hold somebody in on a standard of dangerousness. We're the only state that doesn't have that, and the federal system has that standard as well. So we're the outlier here. New York is the outlier. We need to have that. That's number one. Number two, very few people recognize that a judge's obligation when setting bail under this law is to use the least drastic, least restrictive means to make a determination on bail. So if I'm sitting there as a judge in Supreme Court and I have somebody before me on bail, I have to say, well, I don't have to really set bail to hold him in. I can put an ankle bracelet on him and make him surrender his passport. That's not nearly enough to do the job, Jesse, and that's the problem.
Last week we had Ray Tierney on, and over the course of that he mentioned how he was part of a group that identified that a group of illegal aliens, I think from Venezuela or Mexico, I'm not really sure, it escapes you at the moment, but they were convicted. They were arrested for bringing in 100 pounds of
fentanyl or meth.
Fentanyl or it was meth. It was meth.
Right.
It was crystal meth. Released with no bail. Do we really think that those people are going to come back?
Well, they had the same kind of situation, Jesse, in California, where they brought in like a colossal amount of drugs and pills, and they released them without bail, and these people were in the wind. They totally disappeared. Okay?
They're never coming back.
Of course not.
That's
it's ridiculous.
The problem.
And our mutual friend, Ann Donnelly, who's a DA in Nassau County, talked about these guys who came in from Latin America, organized crews, broke into people's homes on Long Island, Jesse, and they left when they were released by the judges because the judges were mandated to release them, and they disappeared. So this was an organized ring. They were doing organized break-ins into people's homes. And it was just a miracle somebody wasn't hurt or killed in these break-ins. And these are organized conspiracies. I mean, what's wrong with us? So let me switch gears, Jesse. I want to talk to you about something else that agitates me enormously, and that's congestion pricing, because they're really pushing it. And Lieber, who's the head of the MTA, has been pushing very, very hard. Let me tell you the dirty little secret about congestion pricing, in my humble opinion. The reason they're pushing it so hard is they need the money desperately because of the misspending of the MTA, number one. And number two, because the ridership is down enormously. It's down to a small percentage of the previous ridership because of COVID and because of the crime on the subways. They need this as a tax on working people who come in from Long Island, from New Jersey, from Westchester, from Rockland. They need that congestion price from Brooklyn, from Queens, from the Bronx, from Staten Island. They need that revenue to subsidize the subway system and the bus system. What do you think about that?
It's absolutely wrong, and you pointed out it's their fiscal mismanagement that has led to cost overruns and the loss of ride shares. Their quality of service is something that is lacking. Their materials are lacking. They just announced that they are bringing back early 1980s versions of rail cars because the new M9s that they selected and paid hundreds of millions of dollars for are delayed yet again.
Well,
it's unreal.
Well, let me give you another one. That's another dirty little secret of bad governance. You know how pensions work for people, for example, at the MTA? Overtime. So they built it in. Yes. Salaries are based on the annual salary for the last 3 years. So as a judge, when my last 3 years, whatever my annual salary was, they averaged it, whatever that number was, that becomes the base for figuring out what my pension was. All right? I didn't have overtime. MTA people paid their overtime in the last 3 years, and that builds into the base. So you're paying a pension in perpetuity, Jesse, based on inflated numbers that come from inflated overtime. So if you wanted to stop the cash bleeding out of the MTA, that's one of the things they could do across the board. Do not allow inflated overtime in the last 3 years to pad pensions. How's that?
I believe that there are hardworking public servants that are working that overtime and they're needed to provide a service. However, if you have no oversight and you are just padding the overtime, and basically stealing it, there are no controls on it. They have been identified as having any controls on it. And let's not forget, in the midst of the COVID crisis, the MTA received $4 billion in aid from the first CARES Act, COVID CARES Act, that President Trump put forward. And who was a major player to make sure that our MTA system continued to work? It was our Congressman Lee Zeldin.
Well, and you know what the problem is? When they run out of the federal cash, then they're not going to be second and third grab bags of money from the federal government. That was it. These were what they call one-shot, one-time revenue streams. So if they're in trouble now and they need to impose congestion pricing as a revenue stream, what happens when that doesn't solve the problem, Jesse?
Absolutely. Once again, they are using Long Islanders, Long Island taxpayers, Long Island residents as a mere – they are simply the ATM for New York City, because New York City and the MTA cannot control its spending. It's not accountable, and it's just willy-nilly. And we're paying the price at every level.
So let me tell you in a summary capsule before we take the break. Let me tell you why I think congestion pricing is a bad idea. It's a bad idea for the environment because cars are going to be keyed up in certain zones to avoid the penalty, this tax, okay? So you're going to have cars sitting there spilling out exhaust. Tourism is going to go down. Economic development is going to go down because people are not coming into the city, so all the commercial buildings are going to stay at 40% occupancy. Small businesses are not going to be restored, like restaurants and retail shops. The theater and cultural institutions are going to be underplayed because people are not going to be coming into the city for that. New York City residents are going to be penalized because they live in the wrong neighborhood and they're going to have to pay a tax if they go too far south. Commuters, as you correctly point out, all around are going to pay this tax. It's another inflationary tax, Jesse, on the working population, the tourism. It's bad for the environment. It's one-shot revenues that will have been exhausted, and you'll have a perpetual tax on everybody forever and ever and ever, because once they get this congestion pricing in place, they will not be rescinded, Jesse, because that's how taxes work. All right, Kevin's giving us the sign. We'll take a break. We'll be coming back for our last segment. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, Chairman of the Republican Party in Suffolk County and the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. Jesse, there's some issues I want to discuss with you that I think are very important. You know, we've talked about a lot of important issues, but I think none is as important as the one or two that if we can get to in this last segment. This Iran deal, which I've always submitted, was a very bad deal from the very beginning. It threatens the United States' interests and national security and our allies. And now Russia and Iran have been working together. Iran is going to supply drones to Russia's aggression against the Ukraine. Let's talk about this Iran deal. What do you say about it?
This Iran deal was wrong under Obama. It's wrong under Biden. Individuals and public officials like President Trump and Lee Zeldin, our next governor here, were right to stand up and against these accords, this Iran deal. It gave them released in excess of $150 billion in monies to Iran, which they are now using in proxy wars and in attacks against freedom-loving countries, including the United States of America. This is wrong. You can see evil making pacts with each other. And that's what we're seeing with Russia, with Putin and Iran. It's a mistake. It was a mistake under Obama. It's a continuation of a mistake. It's a bad foreign policy position for the United States. And we're going to be suffering the we're going to be suffering the loss of that eventually. We're going to be suffering on a national security level and a domestic security level, and our partners and our friends in Ukraine are first, and then through Europe.
Well, and I have to tell you something. Let's put the blame where it belongs. Has to come right front up. The former President of the United States, Barack Obama, who pushed it, and his Secretary of State, John Kerry, who pushed it. And these people have put us in a very dangerous situation. They've allowed Iran to set the terms of the negotiations. We're begging on bended knee to go back into the deal. For what? So we can give them more money, and ultimately they're still going to get the nuclear weapons anyway. They're pushing the United Arab Emirates and Jordan and Egypt in a situation and Israel, where they're going to have to, if they're going to survive, may have to seriously consider taking a preemptive strike against Iran, because they are out of their minds if they allow the Iranians to get this nuclear weapon. Because if they have that, the whole Middle East and then the world is unstable. Remember when when these mobs chant in Iran, what do they always say? Death to Israel, death to the United States. And
Absolutely.
When people say death to you, you better take it seriously. So I think Biden's got to grow up and he's got to do the right thing. He has to walk away from that and tell the Iranians, too bad, you're not getting a deal. You had your chance. Sanctions, and whatever's necessary. And if they have to give the green light to the Israelis and the Egyptians, the Jordanians, United Arab Emirates to do what's necessary to protect themselves, Biden has no moral authority to stop them from doing the right thing to protect themselves. That's the Iran situation. And the next thing I want to talk about, which really makes my eyes bleed and my head explode, is the United States military. Again, goes back to Barack Obama, continuing with the Biden administration. We're understaffed. We're behind in technology. We've had discussions about artificial intelligence. China is beating us badly in the artificial intelligence drive. Gordon Chang, the expert on China, has been on Cats Tonight, and he's been pointing out they're decades ahead of us in terms of using artificial intelligence as instrumentality of warfare. They've also been using our own DNA to do research, and people don't know this, on biological weapons against us. You know that if they have your DNA, they can target individuals for assassination using a person's DNA. So don't give your DNA away. This is serious business. Again, we're obsessed with political correctness in the military. Political correctness never won a war, Jesse. I don't know if you think that these people know what they're talking about. Give up on political correctness, make our men and women in the armed forces, support them, give them the resources they need, and make them tough. Being nice does not win wars. Being under-equipped does not win wars. Being politically correct does not win wars. And the last thing that's making my eyes bleed and my head explode, Jesse, is this. The unions are saying to the Department of Defense that if we accuse a defense contractor of being a so-called union buster, well, then the contractor can't do business with the Defense Department. Hey, what happens if we need that defense contractor to protect the United States? What do you say about all this, Jesse?
To our listeners, and I say to them, this is not a science fiction movie. This is not a spy thriller book. This is actually going on right now. China and the enemies of the United States are banding together, or they're working independently on their own attacks upon our way of life and our freedoms and our liberties. We need to end, as you pointed out, this wokeness, this political correctness. We need to take a really strong, hard look on calling what is red, calling what is blue, and calling what is white and what is black. We need to move forward and not be worried about offending people of any ilk. We are common sense individuals. We do not mean to move forward in a way to hurt others, but others are trying to hurt us. And if we don't wake up as a country and we don't elect leaders that are going to stand up against this woke mentality and this cancel culture and this political correctness, there's not going to be a country left for us to defend. Right now, we're losing our country because we have no border control. We have no borders. Tens of hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants with fentanyl, crime, gang leaders, human trafficking are crossing back and forth over our borders with impunity. without impunity, and it's just reducing the status of our quality of life and our nation.
It's a national, listen, it's as simple as this. If you don't have national borders that you protect, you have no country. And if you don't have natural borders that you protect and defend, you have no national security, whether it's gangs, whether it's terrorism, whether it's cartels, whether it's drugs being imported in, whether it's the economic harm that you have because you have to support these people. You have cities, democratic cities, they call them sanctuary cities. They have no right to declare a city a sanctuary city. They have no right to do that at all. What do you mean a sanctuary city? Your obligation is to cooperate with the federal laws on immigration. There is no such thing as a matter of law as sanctuary cities. Any government in local jurisdiction that says they have a sanctuary city should be removed from office because they are not enforcing the laws that they're sworn to protect. The immigration laws are laws that have to be protected. Now, let me give you another one. Do you know that China is buying up farmland in the United States and we're allowing them to do this? I mean, how crazy is that? What do you need to have a sustainable economy? You need food, you need water, right? You need energy. We're being attacked on all sides, and that we're giving away at cheap prices U.S. farmland to Chinese. Why are they buying our land, Jesse? What's that all about?
It is their form of aggression. They're playing the long game, and our leaders right now in Albany and in D.C., led by Biden and the Democrats in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, are playing politics. They're holding on for political power at the expense of our nation's sovereignty and at the expense of our people. And that's what we've been seeing along here. We've been seeing that other nations are playing the long game, and our politicians, our Democratic politicians in office, are playing the short game because they're more about politics than they are public safety. And I dare say this, and I say this with all conviction, the Republicans that we're trying to move forward and elect, both at the national level and here in the state of New York, and we've seen them, the difference in adjudication of crime when you have Republican DAs like Ann Donnelly and Ray Tierney, as opposed to their Democratic predecessors, they find ways to make sure that felons that stay up behind bars. We don't hide behind, the failed policies of the cashless bail. We need those type of elected officials to stand up for our society, stand up for our country, stand up for our taxpayers and businesses and our small business entrepreneurs. That's not happening right now.
Well, Jesse, Kevin has given me the ultimate high sign for today's program. I want to thank our special guest, Ravi Batra, distinguished lawyer and diplomat and counsel to President Zelenskyy of the Ukraine, a man of great courage. And Ravi's right. He is the Churchill of our times. I want to thank my good friend and co-host, Jesse Garcia, the chair of the Republican Party in Suffolk County and the vice chair of the state Republican Party. This is Judge Richard Weinberg signing off for this episode of the Long Island Report. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to being back with you again next week. Thanks again.